Good morning. Welcome to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for February 13th, 2024, the day before Valentine's Day. We'll be leading off a closed session. Madam Clerk, you want to read that in?
Item 1, pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Maxwell versus Calaveras County et al., Calaveras County Superior Court case number 22CV46415.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none in the room, is there any online?
There is not.
Very well, we will recess to closed session. We'll return for a regular board meeting at 9 a.m. Thank you. Welcome back to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting for February 13th, 2024. If you can, actually, I'm going to change up the order. We're going to do Pledge of Allegiance and then report out. So if you're able, if you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Paul Jones, would you please lead us? All right. Thank you very much for allowing me to change up the agenda. Is there a report out from closed session?
Yes. Item 1, pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, Maxwell versus Calaveras County et al., Calaveras County Superior Court case number 22CV46415. Board action, no reportable action taken.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to staff announcements. Is there any staff that would like to make an announcement? Anybody online?
There are no online requests.
Very well. We're going to move on to recognitions and acknowledgements. Item number 2. Clerk.
Item 2, proclamation, Clerk of the Board of Supervisors, proclaim the week of February 11th through February 17th, 2024 as Kindness Week in Calaveras County, and further deem the county as a random acts of kindness zone.
Thank you. I'll turn over to Supervisor Huberty, who will run this item.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas National Random Acts of Kindness Week will be observed February 11th through 17th, 2024, and whereas Calaveras County has participated in Random Acts of Kindness Week since 2010, and whereas all who live in and work within Calaveras County are encouraged to practice random acts of kindness, a tradition started in Angels Camp by the Jim Bergantz family. Hi, Jill. Sparkly today. Now, and I'm confused. That's it, isn't it?
That's it.
There shouldn't have been an and there. That's it. So I'll put it to the public. Does anybody have a question or issue regarding?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Come on up to the dais.
I mean, if anyone has an issue, that's okay. That's what we're here for, to talk. So Kindness Week, thank you, Martin. Thank you, all of you. Kindness Week in Calaveras County did start 30 years ago. It started in Angels Camp with a giveaway of 10,000 long stem roses from my parents' flower shop on North Main Street. They wanted to practice a random act of kindness and an act of senseless beauty. In 1994, they grabbed onto the concept of giving something away and not expecting anything in return. And that was 14 years, and 14 years ago, the Board of Supervisors passed the first proclamation recognizing Kindness Week in Calaveras County. And that brings us to today. If it's all right with all of you, I would really love to share an excerpt from a poem. It's from the book Honeybee by the poet Noemi Shihab Nye. In this poem, she writes this lovely poem. It's called Gate A4, and it's about experiencing an accretion of kind acts during a delayed flight, which I think is maybe something all of us have experienced. It can be a very frustrating thing to be stuck in an airport for everyone involved. In Gate A4, Naomi decides that when she sees someone struggling at the gate who does not understand English being spoken, and she does understand the language being spoken, she goes out of her way to translate. I'm going to start during the middle of the poem. So here's Naomi. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts from her bag, and was offering them all to the women at the gate. And to my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend. By now, we were holding hands, and she had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing, with green, furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once of crying and confusion, stopped, seeming apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Your presence at these meetings, where you all show up, ready, prepared, listening, to make the hard decisions that make it possible for a rural community to thrive, show that not everything is lost, that this is possible anywhere. It is possible here. It's been possible here for 30 years because of people like you, and people like you. Good things don't happen on accident. That's something that I know to be true. They happen on purpose, and they happen through kindness. So thank you so much for yet again recognizing kindness, not just this week, but every week, through all the acts that you perform, recognized and unrecognized, always. I appreciate you. Thank you. If anyone has a problem with that, that's okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I'm a bit verklempt. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Do we have any online?
There are no online public comments.
I'll bring it back to the board. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors designates the week of February 11th through 17th, 2024 to be Kindness Week throughout the county. Be it further resolved that the Board of Supervisors declares that the County of Calaveras be deemed a random act of kindness zones during the week of February 11th and continue through the 2024 year.
All right, that felt great. We all agree. Thank you, and can all be kinder. I was negligent in my duty as chair. Supervisor Stoffer is ill and will not be joining us today. So we'll move on to item number 3.
Item 3, proclamation, public health. Adopt a proclamation declaring February 2024 as Children's Oral Health Month in Calaveras County.
All right, Supervisor Ponder, take the call.
Whereas National Children's Dental Health Month brings together dedicated professionals throughout the nation to take action and promote the importance of children's oral health. And whereas the 2024 theme for Children's Oral Health Month is Healthy Habits for Healthy Smiles, encouraging proper dental hygiene in children, thereby creating healthy habits that will last a lifetime. And whereas tooth decay is the most common disease among children, leading to problems with eating, speaking, learning, health, self-esteem, and school attendance. And whereas tooth decay is preventable and starting good oral health at a young age can impact a child's overall health. Prevention can be achieved by educating parents and children on the importance of eliminating sugary foods, beverages, brushing twice a day with toothpaste, flossing, and having regular dental visits. Whereas the future is, to a large measure, dependent on good health of our families. And whereas good health can be achieved in part through good dental habits learned early and reinforced throughout life. And with that, I will open it. May I open it up? I'll open it up to any public comment.
Good morning, Supervisors. I'm Randy Ortloff with Public Health, along with Lori Smalley. I have some words from our State Dental Director, Dr. Jay Kumar. Dental disease is the most common chronic childhood disease, more common than asthma and obesity. Dental disease affects nearly 2/3 of California's children by the time they reach 3rd grade. It is one of the top reasons children are absent from schools. We are both on our oral health program, and we are committed to improving the state of oral health in Calaveras County for all members of our population through education, screenings, and referrals to care. In our efforts to raise awareness for National Children's Dental Health Month, our oral health program will be presenting oral health education to young children and their families at library story times in Murphy's, Oak Hill, Copperopolis, and San Andreas. To educate parents, we will be presenting an oral health informational session to a Head Start parent group, empowering these parents with knowledge to help improve their children's oral health outcomes. This week, we will be distributing dental resources to early child care providers at the Resource Connections Provider Nights in our hope to encourage brushing within the daycare setting. Making brushing a priority at an early age will ensure that our children are healthy before they start kindergarten.
I want to thank you so much for making this proclamation, and throughout the year, we're also promoting oral health in our schools. Last fall, we presented oral health education using our prop here and some other fun props for the kids. We had about 290 kindergartners that at like Albert Michelson, Jenny Lind, Valley Springs, San Andreas, Copperopolis, and West Point Elementaries. So we plan to expand our educational lessons to all grades. Hopefully, for sure, K through 3. We want to catch them when they're young and start training them. So.
We look forward to the implementation of our school-based dental screening program, which will allow us the opportunity to screen children for dental decay to ensure that every child in need of care is referred to a dental home to help relieve their pain. Through school screenings, referrals to care, and educational lessons for parents and students, we hope to improve oral health outcomes for present and future generations of Calaveras children. Thank you again for your support and for the community's support as well.
Thank you.
If there's no other comment in the room, are there any on Zoom?
There are no online.
I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Gay, second by Martin, all in favor? Aye. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors on the 13th day of February 2024 does hereby declare February 2024 a Children's Oral Health Month in Calaveras County.
Bring it to. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all very much. We're going to move on to public comment. I want to reiterate the board rules, which are public comment can be on any item not listed on the agenda. Public comment, general public comment needs to happen from in this room. If you're online and you want to speak to a specific issue, a specific agenda item, that'll be appropriate when that agenda item comes up. So from within the room, is there any general public comment? Chair recognizes Dana Jorgensen, Supervisors, Senator Alvarado's office. Oh, Dan.
Morning, real quick. I got behind the OK Produce truck down at the river, so I was a little late. Just wanted to let you know I'm holding office hours today at the library at 10 o'clock, 10 to noon. Everyone's welcome. I am going to leave in a moment. I'm going to be on a Zoom with AT&T regarding the copper line issue. We've heard extensively from many of the boards in our district that that's a concern. Public safety, sheriffs have spoken out about that, and that is a huge concern, as you all know. So we're going to be looking at that issue. I was in the chair giving blood in Jackson the other day, and I had the gentleman that ran the blood drive, talked to me about his PG&E bill for about 10 minutes. And I paid mine too, so that is something that we are hearing. We're very cognizant of that issue as well. What else can I add? We are accepting applications for our Woman of the Year. We are asking that they do come from an elected official. I know someone has reached out to me. If you, other you folks or people in City of Angels, the council folks there, if they want someone to nominate, just give me a call or go to our website, and the application is there. I can get that to you. There's a couple more days for that. And last thing, I've been following the Calaveras Unified issue. I've had lots of people reach out to me on that, and I've been talking to folks in kind of an advisory role, answering questions, trying to get information from them about where the state budget is going on that issue. I know that's very crucial. I was on a Zoom that started at my desk in El Dorado Hills, and I was driving home on Latrobe Road, bouncing around, and all of a sudden I heard Dana. Well, I had inadvertently hit chat, so I just want to let them know now it was not my intention. That was Latrobe Road doing that. But I went home, and that was a 3-hour Zoom, so we're definitely doing things. And give me a call if anyone has any questions. The thing that I like most about this job is that you pick up the phone and you have no idea what the other person's going to start talking about, and it's actually kind of exciting. So anyway, good to see you all. You're one phone call away. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate the work of Senator Alvarado. Sir?
Hi. Shall I use the timer? I don't know. Hi, my name is Timothy Mormon. I'm the new California State Assemblyman for Calaveras County, and I have a little blurb to read here. The significance of America being a constitutional republic is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Any purported law, statute, code, regulation, rule, or policy made consistently with the enumerated powers of the Constitution are presumed valid. In contrast, any purported law, statute, code, regulation, rule, mandate, or policy which opposes and violates the Constitution in any way whatsoever is unlawful, null and void. No bureaucrat, politician, or person acting in an official governmental capacity has the legal authority to restrict constitutional rights of any law-abiding citizen, nor after the count of the citizens' votes. Do you agree? Also foundational to our constitutional republic is that the process of voting must be free, fair, and accurate. The 2020 presidential election and all elections since were touted by governments at all levels as free, fair, and the most secure elections in history. Since November 20, little by little, evidence has come out that these elections were not free, nor fair, nor secure. For example, every county registrar in every county of the country represented that the voting machines were not connected to the internet. Since then, it's been universally admitted that the voting machines were connected to the internet, either by cable or Wi-Fi. While counties maintain a log of those who physically access the individual machines in person, there is no record of unauthorized access of the machines during using Wi-Fi during non-business hours, nor while actually counting votes. One, since before November 2020 elections, registrars of voters in each county nationwide represented that the voting machines could not be and were not hacked. Did you, a registrar of voters in your county, ever make such a representation to anyone at any time? If so, who? Two, on your with the Federal District Court in Georgia, there is a case named Kern versus Brad Raffensperger. Brad Raffensperger is the Secretary of State of Georgia. 3. Are you aware that during the trial in the case,
Thank you, sir.
Attorney, there we go. Okay.
Hi, my name is Deborah Roby Rojas. I'm Assemblywoman of New California State, Calaveras County. Number 4, are you aware that the machine hacked by Dr. Haldeman is the same type of voting machine used in this county? Number 5, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger has jointly met with the California Secretary of State Shirley N. Weber and the registrars of voters for all of California counties. A, did you participate in any way in this meeting? B, are you willing to discuss with me exactly what was discussed in those meetings? 6, are there any memos and or emails that mention the meeting mentioned in number 5? What was discussed? What, if anything, was decided? Any tasks assigned and any plan of action? A, are you willing to disclose any such memos in emails by this demand for the information and without order of any court? And number 7, are you aware in the federal and the state laws there is something called racketeering, influenced corrupt organizations, RICO? Are you aware that voters in this county generally, and me specifically, have been damaged by the collusion between Mr. Raffensperger, California Secretary of State Weber, and one or more registrars of voters concerning what we now know as a false narrative of the alleged integrity of the elections from November 2020 to present? And then I respectfully request you send a written response to me addressing each and every issue raised herein within 10 days, calendar 10 days. If for any reason you fail to respond or requested to the issues below, your failure may be regarded in any future legal or political proceeding as a tacit admission that the allegations are true and correct. Silence can only be equated with fraud, where there is a legal or a moral duty to speak, and where an inquiry left unanswered would be intentionally misleading. Applying the foundational concepts to the issues at hand for the reasons set forth herein and based on published news from many sources, I believe I have clearly demonstrated how my rights have been violated by your office and possibly you yourself. Such action has violated the federal and state constitutions and the oaths of office you and every member of your office has taken. Your actions as set forth herein have acted against the public good by violating the public trust and warning against the Constitution. Our founding fathers knew that government serves within the constant of the governed. I do not consent to be any unconstitutional.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Terry McBride, New California State. I'm videotaping because, again, everything has been distorted, which I find exceptionally sad in our county. I want you to understand that that document was delivered to the registrar of voters. They're being delivered statewide because our elections have issues. Today, I'm going to read We the People of the Great New State Notice to the Californians Declaration of 12th Constitutional Default, Count 8, Election Treason, the 2018 midterm election, 2021 recall election, and the 2022 midterm elections were all lost in one-to-one balloting, but with the help of a fraudulent elections system, an algorithm, and the actions of the globalist cartels and the CCP, a dictator was installed to oversee the province of California. Now, with the help of the federal courts in the state of Georgia and their unwitting corrupted Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, the evidence is clear for the world to see how the selected treasonous governor of the province of California and thousands of down-ballot corrupt selected officials turned the once great state of California into a Nazi communist totalitarian province. The election case pits an election integrity nonprofit and a handful of Georgia voters against the Secretary of State's office. They claim that the state's computerized voting machines face an unacceptable risk of being hacked, which infringes on the constitutional rights of voters. The case has already made history after Totenberg ordered the state in 2019 to replace its previous voting machines from Diebold election systems. Her ruling came after plaintiffs highlighted the touchscreen machines' vulnerability to being hacked. In response, Georgia brought the Dominion machines and began using them in 2020 presidential election. With the Dominion machines, voters used a touchscreen, also called a ballot marking device, to make their choices. Then they print out their ballots, which have a QR code that have a scanner reads to, record, and tally the votes. During the 6-year case, computer scientists serving as experts for the plaintiffs have uncovered multiple specific ways that both the current Dominion and the previous Diebold voting machines are vulnerable to hacking. The solution, the plaintiffs argue, is to have voters mark paper ballots by hand. Ours went exceptionally well. I wish you guys would have come. You'd have been proud. As nearly 70% of voters do in the rest of the country, the ballots themselves, not just a QR code, would then be scanned, and a procedure known as risk-limiting audit would be used to verify the results. George, so I don't have time to read this. I'm going to give it to you. The reality is in front of a judge. A computer scientist proved that all you needed was a writing pen to hack into the electronic voting machines. They are not secure. And algorithms were used over to select who is running our country. Look at the southern border, you guys. And look what's happening in the southern border of California. Do you look? We're 400 miles away. Thank you.
Bonnie, good morning.
Good morning, Board. I'm sorry I come here to complain all the time, but this is good therapy for me. First, I received, I'm sure you've heard about it, AT&T's proposal to eliminate landlines. Okay, I don't use a cell phone, and I don't want to learn to use one because I'm old now. Second thing I came to complain about was I'm not sure if you've completed the contract with SEIU 2015. I'm not in the union. I was in the union. This is the home care union for Calaveras County Home Care. And I heard a term previously, racketeering. I will attest that I believe my union, which represents SEIU 2015, is almost like racketeers. They're using our money, our peon money, to promote themselves and to promote political agendas that don't benefit the home care workers. And I don't know if you've completed a contract with them, but the last contract that was formally negotiated, ratified, was in 2007. That's when we actually sat down and hammered it out and had a vote with all the members. This union has neglected our requests to negotiate. I know administrative office from this county contacted SEIU about 5 years ago. They didn't want to negotiate. You guys did. They didn't. Okay, my last complaint. Somebody is dumping old mattresses and sofas on Double Springs Road. I got a couple days this week. I drove by and I've seen it loaded up there. I'm not sure if they're coming out of the storage unit and being upset with what their junk looks like, or they're on their way to the dump in Paloma, but we've got something going down there again, and it's just never ending. Anyway, I thank you for your time, and I'll be back because I always have a complaint, and if I don't have anywhere to go, I come here, so thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Is there other public comment in the room? An item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk?
Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request the removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Thank you. Any board member wish to pull an item?
Yes, I'd like to pull items number 15 and 17.
Okay. Other items from the board? Staff, any items you'd like to pull? Public? In the room?
Yes, I believe item number 5. Sir, did you not want to talk about item number 5? Is that the item you wanted to speak about?
Oh,
Number-
no, I'm sorry, I'm on agenda item number 12.
Okay, all right. No.
All right. Any online?
Yes. Mr. Butner?
Mr. Budner, which item would you like to pull? Mr. Budner, what item would you like to pull from consent agenda?
I'm not looking to pull. I had reserved time to speak for general public comments.
I'm sorry, sir, we do not take general public comments online. Very well, moving forward. We have a motion for the consent items excluding 15, 17, and 17.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Moved by Supervisor Follendorf, second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0, 1 absent. Okay, item 15. Robert?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I pulled this item because I was looking at it, and this has been going on for almost 11 years, $2 million, and we don't even have plans drawn up yet for that money, $2 million. What's it gonna end? When do we have an end date on this and we have a set of plans in our hand, we can go out for an RFP? I mean, 11 years, environmental or not environmental, it's getting, we need to take care of this and get it done, get it constructed.
Yes, sir. Approximately half of that $2 million went to the work for Shad Road Bridge. That bridge, all the design work, environmental, so forth, was completed. That's construction has occurred, it's completed. We need to do a few minor things for erosion control, but that was part of their contract to complete all that work. So that's been done. What's left is the other road. Whiskey Slide is very difficult location with a lot of environmental factors that unfortunately impact that location. There have been already many the studies done, environmental studies that have been completed. We need to do more because of the requirements from Fish and Wildlife and so forth. We need to, that's what's before you is the amendment so that we can complete the additional studies. It's true we don't have the plan specs and estimates for that yet, but once these things are done, we hope to complete those plan specs and estimates.
Do we have an end date? Do we know when we're going to be able to have the plans done and go out for an RFP? Do you have any idea? Have we been given, have the contractor given us any estimations?
Yeah, how much time do you think that's gonna be? About a year? Yeah. It's gonna take well, part of the problem also is that once these studies are completed by our side, we submit them to Caltrans for their review and the permitting agencies. And unfortunately, we don't have control of that time that they spend looking at these things and asking us to do more if they don't like what they see. And that's typical for some of this work is dealing with those agencies.
Okay, well, I hope it's a year if we can get on them and get them to complete and get it to Caltrans, and then hopefully a year from now, we can have plans drawn up and go out for an RFP, because as time goes by, it's more money, it's gonna be more expensive. Who knows what's gonna be added onto a list that we'd have to go back and do. I mean, over the last 11 years, I just want to see it completed and move forward on it.
Yes, thank you for your support in this, because we can, we tell the permitting agencies that you're watching, you're concerned, but this helps us to keep pushing that forward with them, and, also speaking with the consultant. We need to get this done. You're interested in getting it done, so all of this helps us. Thank you.
Those are my comments.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept item 15?
I'll move this item, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Toffenali. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Haberty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0, 1 absent. Thank you. Item number 17.
Yeah, I pulled this item, and is Rick, it was him or I was going to pull it, so.
He has more clout than I do.
Well, I don't know, Sheriff. You're the one with the gun.
Oh, well. Good morning, Chair, CEO, County Council. We're retiring one of our dogs, Knox. He's been with us for, what has it been, 7 years, Jim? 7 years. I want to make sure that we recognize Foxo and the community for allowing us to purchase the dog, and you folks for allowing us to purchase the dog. He's done a great job. He had an injury that he sustained that he cannot come back from to continue his work. So we're going to retire him out, and our handler, Sergeant Mosier, is going to keep the dog. So Jimmy, come on up here. I want you to say something, because he's been working with the dog for so long. He's done a lot of training with the dogs.
Many hours.
Good morning.
Tell them a little bit about what Knox has done.
Well, I've had Knox since 2018. He's been every shift, every day with me. He doesn't call in sick. He's been a great dog. He's had his ups and downs. He served this county well, daytime, nighttime. Unfortunately, he has an injury that he shouldn't continue to train with. So I've asked if we can retire the dog out, and I'd be able to keep him as a family dog.
Yeah, I'm sure you've bonded very well, and he's bonded with you very well. Yeah, so
he gets along great.
Truly understand you want to adopt the dog. Absolutely. And he's done a lot of things and over the course of the years.
Yeah,
several of them were in the newspaper, and one of them was in person that we had the situation there.
Down at Copperopolis, yeah.
Yeah.
He did a very good job. He's been a good dog. He's done a lot of work. And he's done a lot of events to where we've done some trainings out at the Vets Hall down in Valley Springs, and had a lot of people out there to watch the training and stuff. So he's been a great asset to the department. So I just want to make sure we recognize him and the work that Sergeant Mosier's put into the dog too. So.
Thank you. I want to echo Supervisor Toffenali's. Knox been a great dog and wonderful officer in our community. And Jim, he's been a good partner to you, and you guys have done great work together. And I'm glad he's finding a good retirement with your family.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I have one question, County Council. There's a fee in here that's, can the board waive that fee? It's only $1, but.
So technically, the board's action today is just to surplus. I know it seems weird to consider a dog property, but technically they are. I mean, mine are my children, but technically, legally, they're property. And so the board's action is to surplus the dog, and then it's the purchasing agent's job to dispose of it. The reason
dispose of it?
I'm sorry, dispose of the surplus property. That's what the code says. Decide what to do with the dog. And so I think the reason for that, contracts, you have to have some sort of consideration. And so each side has to give something. So that's the reason for the $1.
Hey, if each one you want to offer 2 bits, then we can do it that way.
Each of us come up with a quarter.
There you go.
Yeah, I think we'd all be happy to.
Absolutely.
We'll do that. I'll do that before we break for the day. We'll put together the funds. All right. Supervisor Toffenelli, anything else?
That's all I have.
Very good. Any public comment on this item?
Thank you.
Any public comment online on this item?
There's no online public comment.
Seeing none, is there a motion, Supervisor
I move
Toffenelli?
this item, Mr. Chair.
All right, second?
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Hubbard. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 401, and happy retirement to Knox. We're moving along.
Item
Sorry,
19, action item, Administrative Office, approve Title III funding proposals from the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act of 2000 in the amount of $114,940.94.
You said it better than I could. Good morning, Chair and honorable board members. On December 12th, the board approved noticing for the Title III funding proposals from the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act of 2000, which began a 45-day comment period. The conclusion of the 45-day comment period was on January 26, 2024, and we received no public comment. At this time, we are looking for approval to move forward with the proposals as presented.
Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Moved by Supervisor Fallendorf.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 400. Excuse me, 401 absent. Thank you. Item number 20.
Informational item, Administrative Office, receive an update from the Area 12 Agency on Aging, updating the board on current activities and issues.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you to the Board of Supervisors allowing me to speak today. My name is Rich Covello. I live here in Valley Springs. I'm also a volunteer member, Area 12 Agency on Aging. It's a public agency covering 5 counties, Alpine, Amador, Calaveras, Mariposa, and Tuolumne counties. Our goal is to advocate for older adults and ensure opportunities for independence and the highest possible quality of life to allow our 60-plus age individuals to age in place. Calaveras County has a total of 8 seats as advisory council members. We only have 2 filled right now. We have 6 vacancies. That's why I'm here today. I'll be looking to you for some help filling some of those spaces. Since the Area 12 Committee meets 6 times a year, every other month. As volunteers, we help serve as the eyes and ears in our communities, so the agency is aware of issues or trends affecting older adults. We review and approve the area plan and plan updates, which serves as the roadmap for Area 12 Agency on Aging to meet the needs in each community. We help bring pertinent information back to our communities, such as services available for seniors, support groups for caregivers, new information about Alzheimer's. We have a representative to the California senior legislation, watching for upcoming bills that may impact positively or negatively our community. We receive latest information or training regarding topics such as emergency preparation for disasters, caregiving, hospice presentations, and again, Alzheimer's. Every 4 years, we conduct a community needs survey. The results of the survey provide the most current feedback, which helps Area 12 Agency on Aging in planning programs to meet the needs of our seniors, such as quality of life, health and wellness. Survey is mandated by the California Department of Aging. Area 12 Agency on Aging direct services, family caregiver support programs, health insurance, counseling, and advocacy programs. Sometimes you hear it as HICAP. Chore, homemaker, minor home repair, assist qualified individuals with specific services. Medicare shared savings programs, exercise programs, dignity at home fall prevention, information and assistance for aging and disability resource connection. We have contracted services, community organizations for congregate and home delivered meals, transportation through Catholic Charities, Ombudsman, and elder abuse prevention. Area 12 Agency on Aging collaborates with like-minded community organizations to maintain quality service and connect clients with resources they need. There's already a demand for in-home services, transportation, both medical and personal, and meeting nutritional needs through congregate dining and home-delivered meals. These vacancies in Calaveras County offer a real opportunity to seek out voices that want to contribute to the dialogue on community issues. Many of the current members of the Area 12 agency are highly qualified retirees with a great blend of skills. We are looking for individuals with a passion for our older neighbors, additional expertise, and diverse perspectives to join our committee to deepen our connection to Calaveras seniors. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to working with you to help fill these open seats. Along with that, I brought about 5 packets. If you happen to know somebody that may be interested, it's got the information about Area 12. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rick. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Is there any other presentation on this?
Good morning, Board. My name is Kristen Milhoff, and I am the Director at Area 12 Agency on Aging. I want to thank Rich for coming up this morning to really speak about the need for us to have some additional representatives in Calaveras County, and it's imperative that we get those seats filled. So any support that you can give is greatly appreciated. I just wanted to touch on a couple of items this morning just to give you an update. Rich did talk about the needs assessment. It is finally completed. It will be put on our website this afternoon. So you'll get to see all the information that we have gathered with our survey that was conducted in October, as well as we use the California Department of Aging also conducted a statewide survey back at the same period of time between September and October. And we've actually incorporated some of their findings into our report. And it's really interesting. Across the state, there were a few topics that really came up that were a definite need. Minor home repair for individuals living in their homes, trying to keep them updated. Outside yard maintenance to keep their homes free of debris, as well as enough money to live off of in their retirement, and the fear of falling. So those are just some of the topics that really came up in the forefront of this survey, and we'll be addressing those in our area plan. Also, our Family Caregiver Support Program hosted a workshop in partnership with UC Davis and UCSF back in November here in Calaveras County. We had 58 attendees. It was well received. They got a wonderful information. We will be hosting another event in May, on May 15th in Tuolumne County. We try to move this workshop through our 5 counties. That will be held on May 15th at the Tuolumne Resiliency Center. We're currently in the planning stages, so we'll let everyone know because it will be open to anyone in our service area. Also, we'll be placing 2 resource kiosks here in Calaveras County. Thank you to Susan Tomachevich for helping us locate and get in contact with the county library. We'll be putting one here in San Andreas and one at the Angels Camp Library. These are like very large iPads, and they have loaded on them our online resource directory, and it's touchscreen. So individuals can come up and touch the icon that said food, put in their county of resident, and then all the food resources will come up. Anywhere from community resources to state, federal, and local. They also will be provided with a printer and paper so the individuals can print out the information and take them home. And then also, I just wanted to address that our long-standing provider, Common Ground Senior Services, provided us with a letter on February 6th stating that they will not be seeking contract extension with our organization for the home delivered meal program and the transportation programs in Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne counties. The agency would like to thank Common Ground for 24 years of dedicated service to Calaveras County residents in providing home delivered meals and transportation. We have actually started the request for proposal process. We started that last week. We will be going out, the public announcements will be, or the public, announcements in the paper will be going out this week. We have reached out to our current providers to let them know that this will be available. And then this week, we will also be going out to the public to let them know, and other community partners to let them know of this RFP process. It is a very close time frame, but we are hoping that we'll be able to take an organization to our board on June 6th for approval, and then hopefully we'll have someone in place to start services in July. We do have 2 current providers that are very interested in taking on Calaveras County for home delivered meals, and possibly splitting up the areas of Calaveras so it could be addressed on the side closest to Amador County, and then all the areas closer to Tuolumne County. They are currently providers of those services, so I'm not sure where this is going to go. Again, we'll follow the RFP process, but it was very difficult to see, but we wish them the very best. And one last thing, I just wanted to highlight the county investment. So I do have, and I can give you this here. Just some extra copies if you want to look at them, but so the county provides the agency match cash every year, according to our agreement. Calaveras County in 22-23 provided $100,802 of matching to our agency. And during that time, we provided $564,000 worth of services to residents in Calaveras County. So for every dollar that the county provided to us, residents received over $5 of services. So that is a great investment of your dollars at work here in Calaveras County, working with the agency. That is all I have for today. Is there any questions from the board?
Supervisor Hubbard, you're our delegate to the board.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. I'm honored to sit on your board. I think a lot of your work and successes fly under the radar. I don't think a lot of people understand exactly how much you do. It was an eye-opening experience for me. I really appreciated the last year and look forward to this next year of service. Thank you for your help with the issue with Common Grounds. I also want to say that the workshop that you did here in Calaveras was incredibly successful. I want to thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
The board members have questions or comments before we go to public? This is not an action item, but.
I do have a question. Can you say the names of the 2 agencies that were willing to take over?
They're willing to submit an RFP, or at least they're willing to get an RFP so they can review it. That would be Amador Senior Center and Sierra Senior Providers in Tuolumne County.
Thank you.
I would like to add my comment that thank you very much to Common Grounds for all their service over the years, and sorry it didn't work out, but I know you'll do a good job.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this item? Any public comment online?
There is no online public comment.
Excuse me, Stacy?
Good morning, Honorable Chair, members of the board, Madam CEO, and County Council, Stacy Johnston, Calaveras Mariposa Community Action Agency. I just want to echo my thanks to Kristen and Area 12. I've had the pleasure over the last 2 years of developing a relationship with them, and I'm honored to see this relationship foster, have a soft spot in my heart for our aging adult population, and just putting it out there that CMCAA will definitely step up and hopefully be a voice at the table, and seeing how we can be a support through this transition of services in Calaveras County. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to make a public comment?
I'm Marion Coran. You know me, some of you do. I am a retired public health nurse, and I have been an advocate for kids a lot. But I fell last September, and all of a sudden, very active person that I was, I became very inactive, and now I'm home, but I am using Common Ground for transportation to all my physical therapy appointments. And it's an invaluable support service. And I've always been an activist for other people, but never the recipient. Now I'm a recipient. And a heads up to everybody who says, I'm too young to be a recipient to these elderly services, because we will all get older and we will all fall down. And when you fall down when you get older, you break things. And that's what I did. And so then you need services. I have friends, I'm so lucky. So I don't need the home delivered food, but you know, you go to therapy twice a week, your friends burn out. And I don't want to burn out my friends. And so Common Ground is there for me, and I just really appreciate them. And I wanted you to hear from the recipient. So there I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, this was a informational item. We will move on to item 21, which is we will conduct a public hearing. And Casey, you want to read that? And I'll open the hearing.
Item 21, action item, administrative office. 1, conduct a public hearing to receive a public input for the closeout of community development block grant contract 20-CDBG-12009 funded program. And 2, authorize the Director of Health and Human Services Agency to provide or to approve, sign, and submit the closeout certifications and any other necessary documentation.
Thank you. I'm opening a public hearing. Mr. Munoz, take it away.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Today we are here to conduct a public hearing regarding funds distributed to the food bank and seek approval to sign and submit the closeout documents. So in 2020, we executed a contract with the food bank for $232,500. On November 3rd of 2023, the term of the contract ended. During this time frame, over 8,000 individuals were served. The funds were used to support wages, facility costs, transportation supplies, and food. I also have a consultant online with Adams Ashby, Beth Dodd, who is also here to assist in answering any questions the public or you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any questions from or comments from public?
Good morning. My name is Tina Mather, and the food bank is a grateful recipient of the CDBG funds. While it is reported that over 8,000 people benefited from this program, I want to give you some real feel numbers, kind of like air chill factor for the weather. In actuality, when those numbers are reported, that's counting each person one time in a fiscal year. The real numbers are 32,283 people have benefited from this grant during the lifetime of the grant. From all of our programs, that's just CDBG funding, all of our programs, 107,044 people have benefited from our services during the same time frame. And we gave out 2,736,371 pounds of food. I think it's really important that the county knows what a problem hunger is in our community. And from January of 2023 to January of 2024, just comparing January, we've had an 81% increase in the number of people coming for our services. So again, we're very grateful for your support, and we want you to understand how bad the problem is in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'm closing the public hearing and bringing this back to the board. Any other questions from the board? Is there a motion?
A move.
Moved by Supervisor Follendorf. A second?
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Hubbard. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries 4-0, 1 absent. Thank you. With the consent of the board, I would like to group the next 6 items, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27, into a single motion and presentation. Is that acceptable to my board members?
Yes.
Very well.
No. Item 22.
I agree. It's, I don't know, we need to pull it out, but it should definitely be discussed, Supervisor.
Yeah, I'll go with it.
Very well. Who is presenting on this?
Chairman Garamendi, I'll present on this. So items 22 through 27 are all amendments to County Ordinance Code to do with personnel. They're just essentially to clean up the County Ordinance Code to reflect the move from a CAO model to a CEO model. And so item number 22 would amend or would introduce, waive first reading and authorize summary publication of an ordinance amending County Code Chapter 2.08, the Office of County Counsel. 23 would introduce, waive first reading and authorize summary publication of an ordinance amending County Code Sections 2.64.365, appointment department heads, and 2.64.555, disciplinary action department heads and principal assistants. Item number 24 would introduce, waive first reading and authorize summary publication of an ordinance amending County Code Section 2.40.030, planning director. Item number 25 would introduce, waive first reading and authorize summary publication of an ordinance amending County Code Section 12.28.040, airport manager. Item number 26 would introduce, waive first reading and authorize summary publication of an ordinance amending County Code Sections 2.22.040, environmental health agency head, and 2.22.070, director of environmental health. Item number 27 would introduce, waive first reading and authorize summary publication of an ordinance amending County Code Section 6.06.010, Director of Animal Services. Approval of these items, number 22 through 27, would introduce the ordinance, waive a full reading, and authorize summary publication of the ordinance. And again, these are just cleanup items to reflect the change in structure for the county.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public in the room? Any comments online?
There are no online comments.
Very well. Is there a motion to accept items 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27 in a single motion?
Yeah, I'll move this item.
Motion by Supervisor Toffenelli. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Hubbard. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0, 1 absent. We're going to take a 10-minute bio break and then come back for 28. So thank you. Welcome back to the Board of Supervisors meeting. We are on item 28, Madam Clerk.
Item 28, ordinance planning. 1, by 4/5 vote, adopt Chapter 17.75 of the zoning code, an interim urgency ordinance to regulate the demolition and alteration of certain historic buildings and structures. 2, find the adoption of the ordinance to be within the scope of the 2019 General Plan Environmental Impact Report.
Kimber, take it away. It's your item.
Good morning, board members, Madam CEO, Madam County Counsel, members of the public. The item before you this morning is to consider an urgency ordinance to preserve certain historically important buildings and structures pending the adoption of a permanent cultural resources management ordinance. I have a brief slide presentation for you, and I'm just going to try to go through them. And if you have any questions, either during or after, please let me know. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is an interim ordinance regulating historical structures in the county. We do have historical structures in the county, and two very well-recognized structures are actually on the screen, just to show you the importance of these structures in our county. More historical structures that we have in our county, and then I'm going to go into the purpose of the ordinance. So the purpose of the ordinance basically is to allow the general plan to, is to fulfill some of the goals and objectives of the general plan regarding historical structures. I'm going to move this out of the way because I can't really see. Specifically, General Plan Implementation Measure COSHG requires the county to develop a cultural resources management ordinance that includes the establishment of a county register of historical resources and requires a cultural resources study prior to demolition of buildings 75 years or older. The General Plan Implementation Measure COS 8H requires the use of the Secretary of the Interior standards for treatment of historic properties as a guide for evaluating development proposals involving cultural resources. Now, the ordinance applies to structures that are at least 75 years or older and that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places or has been determined to be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, or that has been determined by the Secretary of, by the State Historical Resources Commission to be eligible for listing in the California Register of Historical Resources. Additionally, the planning director will be responsible for determining whether a building or structure meets the criteria of Section 1775, which I just showed you on the screen. And then further on in the ordinance, additional review will be required for listed historical buildings in the county. And this additional requirement would necessitate the chief building official to request the planning director's determination of whether a parcel under review contains a listed historical building or structure. If the parcel contains a listed historical building or structure, the chief building official will not issue a building permit or a demolition permit until a CUP has been approved by the Planning Commission. The chief building official would apply the State Historical Building Code if the parcel contains a listed historical building or structure. Now, the conditional use permit referred to here is going to be a limited scope conditional use permit, which I'm going to get into in my next slide. So for a limited scope conditional use permit, let me move this thing out of the way again. The review of a limited scope conditional use permit will be limited to a review of potentially significant impacts to the listed historical building or structure. If carrying out the proposed construction or demolition activity will result in one or more potentially significant impacts to the listed historical building or structure, conditions of approval may be required. If conditions of approval will not suffice to reduce the potential impacts to the listed historical building or structure to less than a significant level, the application may be denied. CEQA or NEPA review will be limited in scope to reflect the limited scope of the discretionary review authorized by this chapter. CEQA and/or NEPA compliance shall be the responsibility of the planning director. The CUP application shall be reviewed and reported on within 30 days by a panel consisting of the following: a planning director or their designee, the chief building official or their designee, and a designee of the Calaveras County Historical Society. Now, the purpose of this panel review is to make sure that there is independent judgment in the assessment of whether or not a particular structure can undergo this limited scope conditional use permit. So I think it's just a process that involves who you might call experts in the field, building official, who would be the one responsible for issuing a building permit, the planning director, and also a member of a historical society whose interests would be taken care of under this particular process. Now, the responsibilities of this panel that I just mentioned, building official, planning director, and a designee of the historical society, is to determine whether the proposed construction or demolition activity will result in one or more potentially significant impacts to the listed historical building or structure. They would describe, identify potentially significant impacts in writing. They would describe in writing what, if any, requirements or conditions can be feasibly imposed as a condition of the county's approval that will reduce impacts to the point of insignificance. Then the Planning Commission submits recommendations for CEQA compliance to the Planning Commission. Then the Planning Commission has responsibility of making the following findings: that CEQA has been complied with, that approval of the permit is consistent with the general plan and any applicable community plan, that the proposed activity involves a structure or building described in county code, that the commission has read and considered the report prepared by the review panel. Then the commission will provide an explanation of what conditions of approval will be imposed and why they are required to reduce potential impacts to the historical characteristics of the building or structure to the point of insignificance. So, discretionary permits involving historic structures. When regular CEQA and permit review as required for the permit. Examples would include use permits, zoning amendments, maps, etc., etc. Review of historic structures is just one part of the CEQA cultural resources analysis. This part will be done using the panel review, the other part that I just described. Now, there are certain important things that I need to point out, which is any failure to comply with this ordinance will be unlawful in all zones, and it will constitute a public nuisance that may be abated as described in Chapter 8.06 of the County Code. And what are some of the consequences? The planning director may revoke a permit issued under this chapter at any time that has been non-compliance with one or more of the provisions of this chapter. Inspections of the building or structure at issue and the surrounding premises and grounds may be conducted by the planning director, the chief building official, or their designees during regular business hours without prior notice. And any failure to grant entry can result in a warrant. Whether the county enforcement official determines that a public nuisance exists within the unincorporated county, he or she is authorized to utilize the enforcement, abatement, cost recovery, and administrative hearing provisions described in Chapter 8.06 of the County Code, including, as necessary, the summary abatement provisions of that chapter. If in any enforcement action brought to enforce the provisions of this chapter, each parcel owner, permittee, or occupant who causes violation may be jointly and severally liable for all resulting administrative fines and for any and all actual costs of enforcement incurred by the county, including attorney's fees. Each activity that violates this chapter shall be an infraction. Each day that a violation of this chapter continues unabated shall constitute an independent violation. Effective date and duration. Pursuant to Government Code 65858, this ordinance shall take effect immediately upon adoption, but shall expire within 45 days if not first extended by forfeits vote at a subsequent notice public hearing of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any others? Any questions for Gabriel?
I have questions. It refers to 75-year-old buildings. So anytime somebody comes in to get a permit to do some work on a 75-year-old house, say put a roof on or anything, replace carpet, paint, whatever, before a permit is issued, you have to go through this whole
CUP
panel review. So I'm trying to clarify this.
I can speak to that if you'd like, Supervisor Toppinelli. So the short answer is no. It has to be both 75 years old and listed or eligible for listing on one of the state or federal registers. And eligible for listing is a term of art under state law. And so it's not any structure over 75 years. And then also to clarify, it's only for things that already require a permit for the county. So if you were, in your examples, if you were painting or putting in new carpet, that's not something that you have to get. Correct me if I'm wrong, Doug. I don't think you need a permit from Doug to paint.
No, not carpeting.
And so it would not apply to
those. If it's a historic building, though, there are some things that you can't do as far as painting, changing the color of the outside, or
Correct,
changing the.
This urgency ordinance, unless it's something that already requires a permit from the county, then it doesn't even kick in.
Yeah,
So if it's something that you can do without a permit, this urgency ordinance does not affect that.
Well, I have concerns if, I'll let Gary finish the question, but that's one of the things I had a question about, because state and national are different, and there's certain things that would follow under the National Historic Code versus the state historic code, and there are things where unless you are changing what has been registered, you do have to get some of that stuff. So I want to make sure that we're clear, like if we're enforcing the National Historic Code, it's going to be very different than the state historic code. And we need to reflect that in the ordinance.
So yes, they're different. I think the question though is when this is applicable, and it's applicable to structures that are listed or eligible for listing on either, right? And then, so that's just whether or not we're even in the bucket of talking about whether this ordinance applies.
If I may, one of the items I think that they're getting at is the question eligibility, which is used throughout this. And to be eligible, under those codes, which I've reviewed, is pretty broad. It doesn't even have to meet the 50-year threshold for the state of California it just has to be significant. And it's pretty broad on what that is. to be eligible. It doesn't mean you're going to be accepted.
Significant, yes, as determined by either the federally qualified expert for the Federal Register or by the State Historic Resources
But I-
Commission for the
But I
state.
think the key thing is eligible. You know, I'm eligible to play for the NFL. I don't think I'm going to make it. So, so.
I'm just gonna weigh in on that.
I think the point is that we're actually confining it more to 75 years. And so we're actually, but the word eligible is pretty broad.
It's a term of art under state and federal law, and you're right, the word eligible is extremely broad in and of itself. In this context, it means for the state, it means that either the commission has determined, it's not like I can decide it's eligible for listing, you can't decide, it's whether the State Historic Resources Commission has made that determination, or if it's on the federal register, then it's eligible for listing on the state list, whether or not it's actually been listed yet. Now, I will say, it's a policy, if the board wanted to restrict it to things that are currently listed, that would be a policy choice that the board could certainly do. I think the thought process in having it be listed or eligible for listing is that some things just haven't made its way onto the list yet that are in fact eligible, and or the way it works is that if the state commission says this building, you know, that Amanda, you own is eligible for listing, but you say, I don't want it on the list, then it's off, regardless of how historic or important it might be. And so the idea in also including eligible for listing would be to capture those things where maybe the owner has asked for it to be off the list, or it hasn't made its way onto the list yet, but the state or federal experts have determined that it is eligible. That said, it would be a policy choice for the board if you wanted to restrict it to things actually on the list as of today.
So just to provide clarification, I think it has to be on the state's register, but eligible for the federal register, according to
That's not what this reads.
No.
Okay.
No, that's not what he said.
I think Doug wanted to approach your point, and I think Gary's point, I don't want to speak for him, but would a building that's eligible to get a new roof put on, meaning a building that was built before 1949, would they require a CUP to get that roof put on?
Good morning, Board. Doug Oliver, Chief Building Official. So to answer your question,
Did I get that right?
I'm going to enter it right of the record here. Okay, so as it is written, if that building is known through that state organization as either on the register or eligible for the register, if somebody came in and said, I'm going to replace my roof, I would have to say, we need to go through this use permit process. If the state has no knowledge of this building and it's 75 years old, we don't know if it's eligible, nobody has applied for eligibility, and therefore we would not be requiring to go through that CUP process. And to expand on the previous comment about whether we should take eligibility off, if your board chooses to say only things that are on the register, not things that are eligible, that affects the decisions people are going to make with their historic buildings moving forward. Often eligibility for that register makes other grants and funding sources available at the state. And if you say it's not on the register, but it's eligible, and I don't want it eligible, if they apply for any of that funding, if it becomes available, they're not on an eligibility list. They don't know if they're eligible, and they won't want to apply in order to stay under the radar at the state, or with the local, I'm sorry. We want to encourage as much participation because it does make them available to apply for the Mills Act. You get a tax reduction for having a historic building on the register or eligible. You have other programs out there that we don't control that we want to encourage people to participate in. So I would say that not only being on the register, but being eligible for the register, I think that's a good combination to have in here. Although it does create a hardship, it doesn't set up a mechanism that would discourage people from seeking an eligibility.
Gary, you still have the conch.
So if I was to go on the state or federal website, not only would it have the buildings that are on the list, it would have an additional eligible list? I'm trying to get, where do you get this eligibility list from? Does it exist in the state and the federal government?
So
How do you?
So no, the state website lists the buildings that are listed on the state
Listed.
website. And then if a structure is listed on the federal registry, but is not on the state's, it's eligible for listing on the state's. Or if the State Historic Resources Commission considers it eligible for listing, then it is eligible for listing, even though it's not on the list yet.
But
And it's that it affects grant funding.
You
and
as a private
availability.
owner can seek that eligibility.
You can.
Yes.
That's absolutely
If
correct.
if it's not known to the federal or the state organizations, you can seek that eligibility and say, hey, this is what I've got and here's the provenance. And start that process, and we don't want to discourage that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, since we have it in here, and I don't know if we're gonna take it out or not, is how do you determine, when somebody comes in for a building permit, how do you determine it's on an eligibility list? I mean, it's gotta be some way to determine that.
Yeah, there is. We have a local resource who works out of one of the local universities, local mean within the area. They have a list of properties that are not only on the State Historical Register, but also that are eligible for State Historical Register. That information is not readily shared because they want to keep them confidential. For me to get that information myself, I have to identify myself as an official of the county. So you can get that information, but it would actually tell us, for our purposes, whether a property is eligible on the state register, for the state register or for the national register. And they would identify the property and they would assign a code to it, and that code tells you where that property lies.
Okay, all right. I want to get that clarified.
I actually, as I read this, I don't agree with you as I read this ordinance. This is a blanket entitlement that any building over 75 years old is automatically, by default, considered a historic building. Council is shaking her head, and I'd like to know why.
Sorry, if it reads that way, we should edit it because that's absolutely not the intention. So if you look at 1775020A, this chapter applies to buildings or structures at least 75 years old that are either listed on one of the two registries or eligible for one of the two registries. So it's both 75 or older and listed or eligible on one or both, meaning state and or federal registries.
That's correct. And the problem I have is with eligible, because when I read those things, it is very broad on what could be eligible. It is arguably, it doesn't have to be even a certain age. If you can make the case you're eligible, doesn't mean you're going to be accepted. And I think we have to make a difference between those that are part of the historical register. And what's concerning me is this broad brush and the fact that $5,240 to get a CUP to change it on any building over 75 years old is something that I don't know if that's the intent of this, but that's how I read it.
Right, that's definitely not the intent. Again, eligible for listing has legal meaning, as we've just been discussing, and you're correct that to be listed on one or both of those, a building would not need to be 75 years of age or older, but we are saying for our purposes, this only applies to you if you're older than that 75 years cutoff and listed or eligible for listing, which, as Gabriel described, it's a determination that the state has actually made. It's not just anything. It's either on the federal register or the state has made that determination.
That's not how I read the state ordinance. It said that is not eligible is eligible. It doesn't mean it's accepted. So I'm concerned about this broad stroke. I was a California history major and I focused on the gold rush. See, Miss Marvin here is one of my primary sources a long time when I was in school. So I'm just worried about the broad, how it's going to impact a lot of people in this community. Entire little Wilseyville camp is all over 75 years old.
Right. Well, I guess Mr. Oliver can actually tell us how many properties in your years as building official have you run across permits for structures that are 75 years old and have to make a determination one way or the other? Not very many.
Not very many. I'm thinking of maybe 4 in my career where something has come up, and maybe only one of those were a dwelling. Most often we're talking about historic buildings in downtown areas or historic buildings as it relates to mining sites or historic places. And many of the historic buildings that would qualify for this aren't even within my jurisdiction. They would be in a state historic park, or they would be in some other, let's just say in some other authority or control beyond the county. I'll say this: historic preservation is typically what council would say a little squishy. Okay, there is always judgment throughout an entire process of renovating or repairing something that is deemed historic. Whenever you have a historic preservation ordinance, it's not convenient. It's often something that is negotiated to make sure that, in essence, the historic integrity of the building or place is maintained. So someone could come in and say, I want a re-roof on my house, and it would trigger this process. But we could also find out that site, it's the site that's historic, and the roof burned off of that 20 years ago and was replaced with something entirely different. Well, that historic integrity is lost. How do we protect the rest of it? Maybe the new roof is going to be acceptable. It's always a negotiation, because what we're trying to do is shoot the gap between what is affordable for the owner and what is necessary to protect the historic integrity of that site or building. So, I mean, it is possible that a re-roof or something's going to come through, but I'll tell you, if somebody comes in and says, I want to replace my water heater, and they want to get a permit, it doesn't affect the historic integrity of the building. I'm not going to make them put an old 50s boiler back in that building. Neither would I ever want to consider that. And so there is some, well, there's a great deal of flexibility, let's say. But there is a possibility that someone could be in a position to go through this use permit process for something as simple as I'm changing out my windows. I'm replacing my roof. That's always a component, but that's consistent of any historic preservation ordinance to maintain the historic integrity. Sometimes you can't have vinyl windows. Sometimes a comp roof is not appropriate. But what is important to this community as far as historic preservation, and what do you want us to consider in these reviews? Some of this is going to be documented, but some of it's going to be by your direction and understanding in these meetings.
Gary, do you have more questions?
Well, you brought up the fact that it's a building and or a home, and the roof is caved in and it's sat there for a number of years. At what point did we get past this to where it's a danger to let it go any further, because it could collapse all into itself and injure somebody if there's kids playing around it or whatever? I mean, at that point, is that going to happen here? Well, then hell, I'm just going to let it go until it falls apart and comes down.
So I'm going to tell you a story.
Huh?
I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to answer that with a story.
Okay, because we have a building right now in Valley Springs, and it's called the White House. It's actually a home, and it's kind of going down that road right now.
Okay. So there's a specific site that I had to manage all the way to the end. When I was a child, I used to go there to go, play in the snow with my grandparents. That building had been around for a very, very long time. It was a known historic resource. It started collapsing. People continued to use that site after abandonment. People started going in and taking pictures, starting fires. The first step is we try to secure the area and seek the owner. That failed. We boarded up and we cleaned up, the stuff that had collapsed. We tried to protect the building. They break in. We try again. We try and block the driveway. Somebody decides to pull an entire wall out of it. Now it's a structural hazard and people are getting in it. What I'm trying to say is, demolition is the last step that we would take for any building, especially a historic building. We would be taking extra precautions to encourage the owner. And if there are structural components that are too expensive to replace with conventional means, we have the historic building code, which this ordinance would make mandatory. Not that we couldn't invoke it and do anyway, but this is a clear statement that we defer to that for. Is there, show me a way to make this structurally sound using archaic materials or using the existing components that are still there. Give me something similar that I can use that meets the intent, even on commercial buildings. Let's make this affordable and fast and safe. Public safety is always the primary component when you have a historical resource that needs to be protected. If the public is safe, it can stay there in its state as long as it takes for someone to decide to invest in it. It's when people are breaking in, going in, starting fires, leaving garbage, creating vector control, concerns. That's when we have to consider that last option. But I've helped 30 times more historic buildings by sitting down and having a conversation through an ordinance like this in this code book than I ever have tearing one down.
Thank you. Chair Garamendi, perhaps if your concern is costs, since the conditional use permit here is a limited scope CUP, perhaps we may want to address a different cost analysis for that. It's not going to be the same type of CUP for somebody who wants to open up, a storage facility, but if it's for this particular purpose, we might want to impose a different fee, which would require, with County Council's agreement, us to do some kind of a cost analysis. If it takes $5,000 to do a regular CUP, how much would it cost to do a limited scope CUP? Maybe that would come as a relief to some of the concerns that you have. It's not going to cost $5,000.
Thank you, Gabriel. If that was my only concern, we could start that conversation. It goes further. Supervisor Hubbard?
Sure. Yes, I wanted to go back to the list for a second because I do know that there was an old list that existed and then that was being modified. Where are we with the list right now and how many structures do you think we're talking about?
I wish I brought that list with me, but I have a spreadsheet of all the properties, not just properties, monuments, bridges, locations in the county that are recognized as historical at the state and or federal level. The very prominent ones we know. The Copperopolis one and some of these other ones that I've shown in my slide, but there are some other ones that are obscure. We know nothing about them, but they're on that list.
Yeah, I believe that some don't exist anymore that are on that list as well.
Yes.
And then there's some that should have been included that aren't.
That are not.
Okay.
Right. Now, if we eventually get to the point where we actually adopt an ordinance, then it gives us more flexibility as to how you can get on the list or get out of the list. So there'll be that option at that stage. And also it would give us the opportunity to implement the Mills Act. So whoever feels that they are aggrieved by the county requiring them to protect their property and it's going to cost them money to protect it, then they can apply for relief through the Mills Act, which allows them to be able to get tax benefits and other forms of finances for that particular purpose.
The other thing I'd like to say is, being someone who 20 some odd years ago, found a wonderful historic relic and wanted to fix it up, I do believe that the people that take on these projects need to have their head examined, number one. But number two, there's a passion involved.
Oh, it has to be a passion.
And you want to do the best for that building. And I believe that the people in this county have the best interest of the building at heart when they take on these projects.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Fong, are you done, Supervisor?
I'm done, yeah.
Supervisor Fong, did you have a comment? Okay, I have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
My concerns are manyfold. First is there's an urgency ordinance to accomplish this. I recognize this was a hole we should have filled a long time ago. and we're in a vulnerable position at this point for many of our historic buildings. And like Martin, I own a historic building as well, and I am passionate about. But what I'm concerned about is the public process and getting public input on this document. I would vastly prefer that we were able to take this through the public process, through the planning commission, and coming here. So with the caveat, before I get into my details, that whatever we do, if we do move ahead, that needs to move. The regular ordinance needs to go through the public process. And it's not an open checkbook till the end of the extension. So if we do this, I'll want to know a time certain that we're going to see that, so it doesn't go on forever. My main concerns with this is the terms eligibility. Because as I read this, and we only got this, your board only got this on Wednesday afternoon. So we haven't had a chance to public hasn't had a chance to digest this, nor have we. So when I read through this, obviously council and I have a different opinion on what constitutes eligible, but that's also going to make it very subjective for you guys to do your job. I am concerned that really as I read this, any building, and it does say exterior in one part, but it doesn't say it throughout, would be subject to the CUP. A new roof, if you wanted to put a deck on your back, if you wanted to anything that might require a permit, maybe up to and including a water heater. I don't think that would quite apply, but certainly a roof would have to go through a CUP process, which would add at least 6 weeks and $5,400 as it stands today. My other concern is, and I support the idea of demolition. I understand what demolition is, but under this broad blanket that we're putting forward, we talk a lot about construction and alteration. So again, are we keeping the building from being torn down? I understand what that means, but construction alteration suddenly becomes a bit subjective too, or going for a building permit. My final issue is that in this document, we say that we're implementing through the EIR, CIS 8G and 8H as they are written. And what this document does is not how it's written in our general plan. It talks about demolition. It doesn't talk about alterations and construction. And so really, if we're able to work this out and figure out how to make it about demolition, about preserving these buildings, I'd probably even be okay on a limited term for this broad sweep that we're building into eligible. But we have to hammer these things out, or we're going to end up having trying to do the right thing. We could have unintended consequences that could cascade down, and we have to be thoughtful about those unintended consequences. So if there's any response to that, and then we'll open up to public comment.
Well, we're dancing between answering the first question. I think I can answer, but could you repeat that, please?
Eligibility.
Eligibility.
I think we've touched on that before.
So if we agree on the premise that even though there may be a disagreement over the language, if the board agrees that it should be implemented the way council says it is written, we're good, because we will agree that enforcement means 75 years old or older and has to be on the registry, or the state has recognized it as eligible. If you agree that that's what that means, then you've given direction to staff, and that's how we will implement it. And we can write the appropriate procedures for our staff to follow based on that direction.
Second question was construction or alteration and how that is interpreted.
I think I can address that. From my perspective, I think for this particular urgency ordinance, we can limit it to demolition only. But I think going forward, we have to also look at alteration, because alteration changes the character of a historical structure, depending on what the alteration consists of. But since we don't have a regular standing historic preservation ordinance, that is something we can address in that particular ordinance. For the purpose of this ordinance, if the main concern is we don't want buildings to be demolished, without some kind of proper vetting, I think demolition could be the focus of this ordinance. And I think
I think Mr. Elliott's certainly correct. If the board wanted to make the policy decision that for the purposes of this interim ordinance, that it would only be applicable to demolition permits as opposed to other types of building permits which someone would need to obtain from the county, the board can absolutely make that call. But it is true that when it comes time for the permanent ordinance, in order to actually implement those general plan measures, it does apply more broadly than demolition. It applies, we are required to use the Secretary of the Interior standards for restoration and alteration as well. And the only mechanism by which to do that is to require a permit like this. So this, yes, the board could do more limited in scope, but eventually the permanent one will be broader than demolition.
That would come through a public process.
oh yeah, it would go through planning commission. I mean, if you want, yeah, we can even have, community meetings prior to this, just to make sure that we get everybody's buy-in before we go full steam ahead.
Other questions from the board before I open up public comment? All right, public comment. Then we'll bring it back to the board for further discussion.
Hello, my name is Christopher Mandel. I am the Executive Director of the Calaveras County Historical Society, and I'm a resident of Sheep Ranch in Calaveras County. So here we are. We have an important problem, a well-drafted solution, and it won't cost the county any money. How often do you guys hear that? The Historical Society has been in place since 1952. During this time, it's carried out several successful and unsuccessful projects in preservation. The Double Springs Courthouse was preserved and installed in the county museum. It was made of camphor panels that were shipped from China and hauled by mule up to Double Springs. And if the society hadn't stepped in, it would have turned into a pile of rubble. The Altaville Schoolhouse was restored and moved to its current location along the highway. And we've preserved the Red Barn, which was slated for demolition, so that they could build a road from Government Center here to the old airport, which would now, we wouldn't be using that at all. Importantly, George Poor, the former museum director, if he hadn't have changed the downtown Main Street, made the downtown buildings in Main Street into a museum, they were slated for demolition so that they could build a parking structure. And recently, I'd also like to mention the Ramaji Adobe, which we all know his roof has fallen in. I've been to numerous conferences about for preservation, and no one can really help me because they don't understand the dynamics of a rural environment. And also, they've had these ordinances in place in their own communities since the 70s, and they don't know where to start. Fortunately, we do. This ordinance is really well done. Whew, 1 minute. Preservation ordinances, in reality, they don't have much teeth. They range in importance as the structure is itself important. Recently, the Historical Society replaced all of the windows in the old courthouse, and nobody came to ask me, did you replace them with the proper wood for the windows? Of course, we did. So what this really is that the ordinance, it's a diagram, it's a roadmap that allows property owners, the county, and local agencies to address historic properties on a case-by-case basis. I'm gonna have to skip through some of this. What I want to leave you with is this. Calaveras is a very special place, and what makes it special is its long history. People come from all over the world to tour the historic sites of our county. I know this firsthand because I'm the director of the county museum. The historic sites are a legacy passed down by your ancestors. And they are not just important to us, they are important to the history of the founding of this state. And the gold that came out of Calaveras propelled the United States into a world power. One sentence?
You get one sentence.
Okay. We have a responsibility to these places that is much bigger than us. Please consider voting yes on this urgency ordinance before you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize, but We have to be fair to everybody. Ms. Marvin?
Judith Marvin, Murphy's. I've been an architectural historian for over 40 years, working for federal, state, county, and city and private agencies, and have worked under all these laws. I want to point out that CEQA supersedes all county ordinances, and if somebody wants to sue, it doesn't matter whether you have a county ordinance or not. They'll go ahead and sue you under CEQA. So that's a moot point. I want to say how important it is that we have this demolition ordinance. In 1976, I conducted a historic resources inventory of Murphy's at the office, at the suggestion of the Office of Historic Preservation. Of those buildings, only over 1/4 of them have been demolished. And so you lose a lot, that sort of thing. And in Murphy's, we're about to lose our wonderful 1860 school, the oldest continuously operated school in California, due to what's called demolition by neglect. And these sorts of things we have to preserve. Otherwise, we can just be like, downtown Ripon. Nobody's coming to Calaveras County to go to CVS or go to Burger King or any of those places. So, and I wanted to point out one other thing. I worked for Tuolumne County, wrote the historic resources overview for the Tuolumne County cultural resources element. And in the 30-some years that that's been in Tuolumne County has had the ordinance, I can tell you not many places have been stopped from, that hasn't stopped any development in Tuolumne County that I've ever noticed, and the only thing that's ever been demolished is pretty awful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marvin. Sal?
I'm Sal Manna, and I'm the president of the Society for the Preservation of West Calaveras History, which is a California incorporated nonprofit since 2006. And the reason I'm here is because the threat of the demolition of the Valley Springs Train Depot, which is more than 130 years old, the last remaining depot of the San Joaquin Sierra Nevada Railroad, certified eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, on the state's list of California historic places, and considered historically significant by the State Office of Historic Preservation and the California Department of Transportation, which concurred with that designation. But this vote today is not solely about the train depot or even the details of a historic preservation ordinance. Every county is supposed to have a cultural resources focus in their general plan, and so does Calaveras County. What we don't have is a code where processes and responsibilities are clearly spelled out, and that failure is to the detriment of both the community and property owners. There will be a historic preservation ordinance here, make no mistake about that, but the details have to be worked out and debated and put before public hearings. There are details that I may object to, details that you may object to. What this vote today is about is whether to allow folks to destroy a historic property while the community decides what those details will be, what that process will be. This is a temporary ordinance until that is completed, a temporary freeze, per se, to protect our cultural resources. If this interim ordinance is not passed today, and the Valley Springs Train Depot, which is at the center of our town, a symbol of our town, the heart and soul of our town, happens to be destroyed before a permanent ordinance is established, which will give the property owner and the community an opportunity to come to an agreement that will satisfy both of them. It will be very clear who will be responsible for that. And that is why there is an urgency to this particular ordinance. Thank you.
Julia?
Julia Costello, McCullum Hill. I'm an archaeologist, but I've been involved in historic preservation and determining significance of historic properties, working with Judith Marvin. I think Sal said it very well. This is a 45-day emergency ordinance, and to restrict it to demolition seems appropriate. Columbia Hill has the only design review district in Calaveras County, and it may seem kind of unusual. We're, a small mountain town, and sitting on our design review board are Mike DeLordo and Terry Weatherby, and some hardcore, libertine, conservative people. But really the catalyst for that was about 15 years ago. There's a beautiful barn on the right-hand side as you descend down into the canyon, and it sat there silhouetted, and everyone took it for granted. And then the company Enco bought that property and was going to put it in an industrial park. And through a lot of ramifications, it didn't happen. And that's a historic area. It's Lower Italian Gardens. I made some presentations here, but the Enco people decided if they tore down the barn, then it wouldn't be historically eligible anymore. That wasn't the case. There were lots of other elements, but suddenly that barn disappeared, and it galvanized the community. People who never thought they cared about historic preservation went, what happened to the barn? Where is this icon of the edge of our town? And the ordinance, within 2 years, we had 4 or 5 public meetings in the town hall. Property owners signed up their properties to be on the registry, and we passed it, and the Board of Supervisors passed it as an ordinance. So it's important. We have a sacrificial lamb. The barn got our ordinance in, got our design review, but we shouldn't have to have those sacrificial lambs in order to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Other public comments? Are there any online? Oh, come on up.
Hi again. My name is Jill Brigance. I'm a local journalist who's covered the work of Judith and Julia, and also a local writer who writes about this county. My family's been here for 3 generations. Supervisor Garamendi, I do not need to share this with you. I know this is a fact you already know. In February of 1850, there were 27 counties that established California. Ours was one of them. Which makes this home to some of the oldest and most culturally significant structures in this state. This ordinance exists in comparable Gold Rush era counties, specifically in our neighbor to the south, Tuolumne County. The people who are sitting in this room had a large hand in how that happened. They are experts. I believe in them strongly. Also, there are 4 of you here today, and you stand in the gap for these structures in Calaveras County. These structures need a voice. They need it now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm asking for it to be yours.
Is there any comment online?
There are no online public comments.
Okay, bring it back to the board for discussion. How do you guys want to go about this?
Amanda had some questions.
I don't have questions. I merely have some comments, and some of them might be repetitive from the public. But I think this ordinance is pretty normal. Honestly, I think it's pretty light in comparison to like cities and counties, as Joel has pointed out, that most of the mother lode does already have a historic preservation. We're kind of the abnormal county in the region that doesn't have something on the books. Being as an elected in another jurisdiction, making these type of decisions with planning and building, it is not an easy decision when you do get to the point of demolition. But in my experience, it is a thorough process. And there's a lot of negotiation that happened. There's a lot of public forum that happened. And it is not easy, but when there's usually a compromise to that. And one example, I know that it's different regulations and a lot more stricter within the city, but the city council was going to have to go in and demo a building in downtown because of public safety issues. And in the negotiation with the owner, they could build a new building, but the facade just had to mimic what was on the register. And so there are options. They could have built it to modern, have the modern windows, have all that, as long as the outside matched the historic district and the historic building of what was on the state and national. Thankfully, the building owner was able to bring it up to structurally sound, but it wasn't easy. It was a year-long process that took a lot of input from many people in this room. And I think this ordinance is a good step in the right direction. I think we can learn from the other counties as we go through the public process of taking it back to the planning commission and working its way back to us. But we have nothing, and it's not just one district. There are many buildings in all of the districts, and holistically, we are all in places where these buildings are going to be threatened if we do not do something about it. And I feel that we need to make the first step of going in within the reasonable of, property rights. But I think this is a great step in the right direction, and I don't question the ability of staff to be able to be creative in those negotiations to ensure that we are protecting our assets in this county.
Thank you. I would just like to reiterate again, and I think Doug touched on it, is the fact that with the proper ordinance, we will be able to get grants, federal grants, as well as state grants to help protect these buildings, which is so important. As Ms. Marvin pointed out, I mean, in my district, the Douglas Flat schoolhouse as well as the Murphy Schoolhouse are in dire need of repair. And the sooner that we can do that, the better off we'll be. Thank you.
I will disclose that, I'm currently under the design, or my historic building, I'm currently under design review, so this isn't going to impact what's going on in downtown Oak Hill. I think this is important. I question sometimes whether this is an appropriate use of urgency ordinance, but, and I also have grave concerns about the broad stroke that we're putting forward. We're including everybody in the kitchen sink, arguably. Everybody in the kitchen sink, which is okay for a short period of time while we do this. But I am very concerned about the ambiguity between construction and renovation in this. So if it was limited to demolition and it was for a limited period while we expeditiously conduct public hearings to get this done, I could support that. But the broad stroke of this, if somebody gets a $5,200 bill in order to replace the roof on their garage, I don't think that's our intent. And I want to make sure that our intent is clear. We're trying to preserve the history of the county, not make people who have older homes not be able to make improvements in their homes.
This ordinance is going to come back to us, the final ordinance, once it goes to the planning commission and goes forward, is going to have a lot more in it than just demolition.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the concerns you're talking about now are going to show up there.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about it at that point. I mean, you can vote no on it, or we can make some changes on it, but it has to cover a lot of different things, including if it's on the federal registry, what kind of roof you can put on it, what color of roof, what color you can paint it. I mean, I don't think, I understand what you're saying, Jack. I really do. I completely understand what you're conveying here. But I don't think when this thing comes back to us, we're going to have a whole lot of leeway from what you're saying than what's going to be presented to us because of the designations, whether they're federal or state, and the requirements they require in order for us to issue a permit for a historical landmark, whether it's roof, restoration, construction. A lot of things have to be covered in this thing. And Gabriel's shaking his head yes, because there's just so many components to this, just not demolition.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree with you more, Gary, and anticipate that public process will be robust, and there'll be lots of opinions on it, and a lot of this stuff will be hashed out. But I want to make a point again that the only time the public or your board has seen this started Wednesday. So I want to stay limited while we continue what should clearly be a public process. And this has not been a public process.
I would like to point out a very obvious point here, which is, in order for this ordinance to pass, it's going to take a 4/5 vote, which means all four of you have to agree to it for it to pass today. If you have any reservations at all, as because of language, broad stroke, we may want to consider a time when there will be 5 of you, and if we have one objection, then at least there will be a 4/5 vote. And if there are any other changes you want to recommend to this ordinance at that time, we might be able to rectify some of that. Now, this ordinance is going to be very specific. It's just a stopgap ordinance. If you want it to be focused strictly on stopping demolition, I think we can go ahead with this. The actual ordinance that's going to come after this one is going to be more detailed, because it's going to require additional language and so on and so forth. Well, we can work out the details over time. But as far as what you have in front of you today, I think County Council has said she can make modifications whereby we focus only on demolition. If that is agreeable to all 4 of you, then I think we may have an ordinance passed. If that's not agreeable, I think the alternative might be to continue this item to a different date so that we can work things out and also have a 5th board member in case, we don't get 4 votes.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think we understand how the vote works. And appreciate your education of us.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
This ordinance is going to come back to us in 45 days, regardless of what we do right now, whether we agree to put it on hold, have some changes made to it, or take it as it is, and then 45 days from now, it will come back to us.
I understand that.
So if you're willing that we just, as it's written, and during the 45 days, we can make it, the staff have time to go through and maybe have some of the things that you're talking about when it comes back 45 days, incorporated into some of it. Because I don't think in 45 days, we're going to run into somebody coming in wanting to do any of the changes that you're talking about. We haven't had that, as Doug said, he hasn't had some of that in quite a while.
I do want
Brad, are you saying that you haven't had a building that's over 75 years old come in for a roof permit or any permits? I don't think that's what you meant.
He was talking about a residence, and I thought that's what you were talking about.
I'm talking about both.
I was being asked to just recall in my career, known elements, known structures. So I can't say without running a report and talking to staff if there's any specific historic buildings in the last few, other than a demolition permit that was applied for that was subsequently rejected. But not for this reason, because there was certain requirements at the state for air pollution control. Yeah, so I understand what you're trying to say.
So my point, Gary, is I'm willing to support this if it's demolition. I'm not willing, even though it's coming back 45 days, these things usually get extended unless we want to rehash the whole thing and extend it. But I just think that this could be a zombie and keep going on for a while. And I want to do two things. I want to make sure we don't have too broad a brush, that we're specifically fixing what we declare as an emergency. And I want to make sure that planning gets something in front of us post haste, so we don't have to use urgency ordinance to legislate. So I'm willing to work on those things, and I'll do it today.
It just occurred to me that we might be able to make a recommendation, knowing that 45 days is not going to be enough time to bring you the full ordinance, but if refreshing this ordinance with maybe a sentence or two identifying that potentially repairs to the building that do not affect the historic integrity of the building may be exempted from the secret process by the concurrence of the planning and building director. That would streamline a lot of these issues I think you would be having. We couldn't make that change now, but we could bring it back in 45 days.
So just on that point, you know, the way that the urgency ordinance statutes are written, the interim ordinance, as everyone has stated, is initially in effect for only 45 days. The board then has the ability to extend that for up to another nearly 2 years. Don't ask me why it's 22 months and 15 days. And while I do think that if there were cleanup or typo type changes that needed to be made at the time the board renews it, if the board were to renew it beyond the 45 days, we could absolutely do those at that time. I think if the board is talking about making substantive changes to really the content of the ordinance, to me, that is not extending the existing. I mean, it's a good point, Supervisor Toffenelli, but I think that if the changes are, at some point, it doesn't become extending what we've got. It becomes something different.
No, but you can allow that one to die and take in a new one.
Yes, although there are rules surrounding that as well. And I think if it's too, I guess what I'm trying to articulate probably really poorly is that if there are changes that a majority of, or, you know, the four of you can agree to today, I'm happy to work with drafting those. And if that is a possibility, I think that would be preferable than trying to change it in 45 days when it gets extended.
So the question becomes, are we going to amend this now?
Sounds to me like that's the best solution. Can we?
We absolutely. The board can absolutely direct changes, edits to what you've been presented with today. If they are relatively minimal, and I don't mean minimal to be dismissive of their import, but rather just in terms of drafting, like we're only striking out. So for instance, if we were to change this to something that only implements the CUP process for demolition permits only, that's a relatively easy, that'll take me 10 minutes to go through this and make sure I'm striking all references to construction or alteration. If it's more extensive changes, then it may take me a little bit more time.
Does it have to come back then?
No, so again, just to use this as an example, I'm certainly not trying to make policy decisions for the board. If we were to go through and delete references to construction or alteration permits and limit it to demolition permits, no, that's not something, we can just do that now and the board could adopt that today.
So, Madam Council, if we took a 30-minute break, since it's only going to take you 10 minutes to do this red line, can we have a red line in front of us that it makes it just for demolition?
I can do that in 30 minutes, yes.
I give you more time if you need it.
Oh, I thought you said, no, yeah.
No, I said, I was.
Yes, you said 10
I did,
minutes.
yeah, she said 10 minutes, I thought 30 was being generous.
I can do it in 30, I can do it in 50, I'll say 15.
I don't want to diminish the importance of this. I also just don't want to have the unintended consequences that could happen.
I understand that's absolutely a policy decision for the board. As Mr. Elliott has pointed out, you know, in order to be compliant with CEQA, the general plan, et cetera, the permanent ordinance will be more robust, but as an interim measure, the board certainly could decide to limit it in scope to demolition permits.
Okay, so the question before I'll put to the board is, you want to have the county council make the amendments and get this done now, or do you guys want to punt to the next meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Very well.
15-minute break.
We will, so there's consensus to do that. Madam Council, we will reconvene this meeting at noon, and we'll all read through it as soon as it's ready.
Okay, Madam Clerk, if I were to provide you with a...
Excuse me, would you rather have lunch and come back at 1 o'clock?
That's entirely your preference. I'm fine either way, truly.
I have a...
All right, 12 o'clock.
Madam Clerk, if I could...
In that the interpreters were not scheduled to interpret that long, and I know that some of us need to leave.
I will leave that for the clerk of the board to work out with you. Thank you, Holly.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sorry, just quickly, Madam Clerk, if I were to provide you with that red line at noon, is that something you can throw it up on the screen so everyone can?
Absolutely.
Perfect, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. We stand adjourned until noon. Excuse me, recessed. All right, welcome back to the Board of Supervisors meeting. Thank you for their patience in that recess. Hey, Council, do you want to introduce what we got in front of us?
Sure. I'm going to attempt to share my screen without showing you the embarrassing number of icons on my desktop. Okay. I also made hard copies for everybody, I think, that's here in the room, and the hard copies are identical to what is on the screen right now. So I basically just tracked changes and if I did what I intended to do, removed references to alteration or construction permits and therefore limited this interim ordinance to demolition permits. And if anyone sees anything that I missed, I am happy to look at it.
Take this back. Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, if you want me to walk through them all, I can, or?
What is the preference of this board? I'm going to open the public comment up again because we've made a change to the ordinance that we're looking at. But
It's fine with me, I just had one question. If I could ask you, sir, on 17.75.0, sorry. In 17.75.050 in C, there is a red mark, but there's no, I don't know if that was something that was eliminated or.
I deleted an extra space.
Oh,
There were
okay.
3 spaces in between sentences.
Thank
I actually prefer 1 myself, but I think this has 2 throughout, but there were 3 there.
Thank you.
questions from the board? Well, because we've changed this document, I'd like to offer public comment again. Any comment from the public on this new version? Okay, well, if I got Judy and on there, I'm good to go. Any further comments from staff on this, or members of the board, would you like to walk through each item, or are they pretty clear? You'd like to walk through each item? Oh, sorry.
No, I would just state, you know, it's the same as before. It's just more limited in scope, and now will apply only to folks looking to obtain demolition permits from the building department.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments online?
There are no online public comments.
All right. I'll call for the vote, but we should probably all explain ourselves. I think my comments were clear, but I think that what we have to talk about, what we have to think about this is the broad impacts to the overall county. We've talked about issues in Murphy's. We've talked about issues in McCalmy Hill, talked about issues on 49 going out to Angels Camp over, and then as Gary pointed out, also, the White House down in Valley Springs. So this impacts all of us, and I will be supporting this when the vote is called.
I would just like to say that some of the people that I respect the most in this county are sitting in the audience right now, and I want to thank you for your passion, your diligence, and the number of hours that you've just given to the county and your heart for things like this. It's very important, and I really appreciate all that you've done.
Okay, seeing no further, I will ask for a motion.
Move.
So just to be moved
by
doesn't
Supervisor
end it,
Sullivan.
correct?
I will second.
Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes 4-0, 1 absent. Thank you. Morning, Gary. It's a happy hands day. Very well. Deep breath, everybody, and we'll move on to supervisors' announcements. Madam Clerk, you want to read that one in? Sorry about that.
In compliance with Government Code 532.3D, board members shall provide a brief reports on any meetings attended at the expense of the local agency and may make other announcements or report out.
Gary, we'll go District 1 first.
Sorry. I attended a COG meeting to which Caltrans representative stood up and said that they were awarded $300 million for charging stations in California. So I immediately said 58 counties. He said that would equate to 300 charging stations. And I immediately said, since there's 58 counties, that equates to 5 per county. And we will get back to him on where we want our 5 located. So that's pending when he comes back next month. I also wanted to bring up, other than that, I want to bring up, and it was brought up today during public comments, I think, that AT&T has sent letters out to most of the people that have landlines in Calaveras County that they are going to now remove their landlines. And this puts a lot of elderly people that don't have cell phones or don't want cell phones at risk of not having a landline. So I'm wanting to ask the board, are they interested in maybe sending a letter signed by the board to AT&T asking them to not do that? If we put a letter together, is the board willing to do that?
Martin?
Yeah, I actually asked the chair about this as well. I've been getting bombarded, and I feel very strongly that the 2 in-public meetings are down in Southern California regarding this. I do have the link. Terry Woodrow forwarded me the link that people can actually write letters themselves, but I think a letter from the board would really be appropriate.
So I agree with giving direction. So if we could, for our next board meeting, have a letter written to that extent.
Yes, the admin office will put that letter together for your board.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Gary. Amanda?
Yes, I got a couple of things to report. I too attended the COG meeting, but after that is the CTA, which is the Calaveras Transit Authority. And compared to last year, our ridership in the county using Calaveras Connect is at 46.7%. So as of this moment in time. So that is a huge increase from last year. Last year there were 12,641 riders. This year there's 18,548 riders. And so I think a lot of people were worried coming out of COVID that people weren't going to be using public transportation, and we're really seeing a huge increase. One of the biggest increase actually is to Columbia College. So they're up 38.7%. So it's going well. So I just wanted to let the board know about that. I also attended last Thursday. CEO Hitchcock was there as well, along with the CAO of Tuolumne County and the economic director and the ag commissioner. We also had each county within the UC region represented. So we had a board member from Amador, Eldorado, Calaveras, and Tuolumne at the slaughter processing stakeholder meeting. And it was really, really good turnout. Due to the weather, some people did join online. But we had, I want to say, almost 40 people from the public in that room physically. And so it was a really good conversation. By the end of the meeting, all of the producers wanted each other's phone numbers. So we got consensus to share their information so they could collaborate offline and discuss things they did not feel comfortable discussing in front of the government. But it's been a really good, and I got to thank the UC Extension for stepping up and really taking the lead on this, and Tuolumne County for hosting that at their OES office. That's all I have.
Supervisor Humphrey?
I wanted to start by just thanking administration, and I think we've all done the Parks and Rec meeting with the company that's doing the report. On the 29th at Faith Lutheran, I wanted to thank the county, Corey, Wendy, Lee, Jerry from Sierra Hope, the Continuum of Care, and we had 3 representatives from the Sheriff's Department to talk about homelessness in Murphy's. On the 31st, I attended a Caltrans meeting via Zoom to talk about the crosswalk situation that we have outside Michelson School, crossing Highway 4. I also attended the Calaveras Big Trees Association meeting. On the 1st, I attended the Agency on Aging meeting, and then on the 5th, I attended the Utica Town Hall, as well as had a private meeting regarding the FERC exemption that we're looking for. On the 7th, Caltrans meeting was regarding the Upper Highway 4 corridor. We do that in conjunction with Terry Woodrow, in the supervisor in Alpine County. As well as I wanted to thank Corey again from Health and Human Services for helping me with the Evans Pass Property Owners Council and getting 2 representatives to talk to them about COVID vaccinations and what's going on with health these days.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, lots of meetings, it's been a long time since we got together. I want to just remind the board that I am part of an ad hoc for what we're calling Williamson Act 2.0. And so I've reached out to staff and people who are working that, really trying to get some input from the practitioner's point of view on that law that we could bring down to RCRC, to this ad hoc committee, hopefully present some real legislative improvements to that act by the end of the year. So as those things come together, we work with the Farm Bureau, working with our staff, working with State Farm Bureau and Department of Conservation, and hopefully we can make this an effective piece of legislation that'll last another 50 years. Golden State Connect Authority continues to do their work. I want to thank Kathy and Gabriel and Doug and Public Works, who have really been working, and Stan, who have really been working and making this happen. The drones flying over are your government, but it's actually just surveying to put in new internet. So I'm excited about that, and hopefully we'll have some news in the next month or so. Sierra Nevada Conservancy, I have a meeting coming up where we're going to do a whole lot of grant making. We know the state's budget, so we're going to do a whole lot of encumbering and get some projects. A lot of those projects are really good for Calaveras County and fire prevention, and they cover just about all the different regions of our county. So good days. Is there anything you'd like to report out on, Madam CEO?
So I would like to mention that I also met with Joel Metzger and Utica Power and Water regarding their FERC exemption application. He has requested a formal letter of support from your board. And so with your board's permission, we'd like to bring that forward for you to consider.
Board, you guys want to consider it?
Yeah, I think there's still some more investigation that I would like to do, but I would definitely consider it.
So maybe you could work with Martin. Should we get that right? Anything else? Madam Council? Clerk?
All good.
Very well. We stand adjourned. Thank you.